Hi everyone, we're back and we're going to get started on creating our new mini album using Let's Lumberjack by Echo Park. We're going to be making a 5.5 by 7.5 mini album, so that's the size the cover is going to be. And I am going to use the red artisan cardstock to create this album. So let's move this out of the way and let's get started. So in the description box, I will put these little bit of a cutting guide I've got for you. And like I always say, please feel free to use, but please, if you wouldn't mind giving me credit for the creation of the album, I would appreciate that. And remember, this is a design team project for Country Craft Creations, and everything I'm using today you can buy from Country Craft Creations. And yeah, let's get started. So I'm just going to move my instructions to one side so I can refer to them as I need to. So I've pre-cut my chipboard just to make things go a little quicker. And they measure 5.5 by 7.5. So you need two that size. And then you need one that measures 2. Even though it says 2.5 on there, it should only say 2. So let's get rid of that. So 2 by 7.5, and the instructions also say 2 by 7.5. So we are going to get out our cardstock, and I have pre-cut this, and we're going to work on the spine piece first because I always like to give a little time to dry. And we are using Tammy Merrill's 3-part binding system, or 3-part creation of an album. And so the spine piece needs to measure 5 by 9.5. And I just recently learned a very easy way to remember this. So we always want to have wings on our spine piece. So when we're getting ready to measure this out and figure it out, if we keep in mind whatever the width of our spine is, and then add 3 inches. So you want 1.5 inches on the left and 1.5 inches on the right. So in this case, my spine is 2 inches wide. So to get my 1.5 inches on either side, I need to add 3 inches. That gets me to 5. So I hope that kind of helps you when you're trying to design an album for yourself. And that's, I believe it was Tammy that mentioned that in one of her tutorials. So our artisan cardstock is cut at 5 by 9.5. So I'm going to butt it right up into the left-hand corner of my scoreboard. And if you watch me, you know that I always use my scoreboard as one of my tools when I'm creating an album. And I use these lovely spacers that you can get at Country Craft Creations. And they're just awesome, because what you want is you want 1 inch across the top, and you want 1.5 inches down the side. And if you don't have these spacers, you can make your own just using chipboard. But these are available in the store. They stand up. They're wonderful. So just to make things go a little quicker, I have added my adhesive to the back of my chipboard. And I have burnished it, at least I thought I had, so let's give it another burnish. Because you want your backing to just lift off of the adhesive, just like that, so that it is stuck to the chipboard, as my fingers are attached to it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chipboard, I'm going to butt it right up against the top of this spacer, and right against the spacer that's running down the side, like so. I'm going to move my spacers, and I'm not going to need that one anymore, the 1.5 inches. Put that one up there too, so I'm not cluttering my space. As we can see, I've already started. Now what we want to do is we want to fold our cardstock over our chipboard. And because I'm using artisan, I know I can do this without any worry of cracking. If you're using a different cardstock, I would strongly recommend that you do some kind of a test run just to see how much can you really force it. And I'm doing the other long side. And then I'm going to reverse that. So because it's our spine, we want our cardstock to work forward and back. And all we're doing right now is we're saying to it, okay, get used to this. This is what this is what's going to happen to you. And then we want to fold the bottoms. And the top. Maybe this will be the top, bottom. Just don't know. And then what we want to do is we want to lay it down so that this is I always refer to this as the good side. And then I'm going to take my burnishing tool and I'm just going to burnish. All I'm doing is running it up along the edge of the chipboard. That's all I am doing. And you can turn it around because I like to work from the bottom up. That's just my preference. Doesn't really make it right, doesn't make it wrong. It just sort of means what I do. And I have some sparkles on my work surface here because I've just finished a project where I was using a ton of glitter. So good thing this is kind of a fall wintry album because it's going to have some glitter on it. So the next thing we want to do is I want to cut out my rectangles. All 4 of them, because I'm trying to get rid of as much of the bulk as I possibly can. And what you want to do is you want to take your scissors without glue on the edge of them like mine have right now. You want to take your scissors and you're just cutting up to that square, or that X, I should say. Okay, so you're about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard, and then you turn, and I guess I called it a square and I should have called it a rectangle, and then it should just literally fall out, maybe a little tug. So I'm going to do this again. So I'm cutting on my fold line that I created when I was folding everything to about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard. Then I'm turning and I'm cutting on this fold line. That one fell right out. That's the way I like it to happen. And again. And like I say, all we're doing by doing this is just getting rid of some bulk that we really don't need to have. Cut it the other way. Go. And now the last one. Cutting along the fold line to about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard, and then turning and repeating. And there we go. Now we want to miter our little tab at the top and the bottom, just so it's clean, and it also lets us get rid of anything that might be hanging over. So just a slight miter. You don't have to overdo it. And then we're going to reverse it and do the other side. So can you guys, let's see, right here, that's where I pulled on my cardstock as I was cutting out the corner. And so what you want to try and do when you're mitering is get rid of that. And most of the time you can. Every once in a while, it doesn't happen, but we try. And again, repeat. Okay. And I'm going to get out my glue of choice, which happens to be the art glitter glue that Tammy sells in the store. And I will try to remember to put a link to Tammy's store in the description. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a bead of the art glitter glue right along the edge of the chipboard. So we're adding the glue, hold it like this, to the cardstock, but right along the edge of the chipboard. And that softens these fibers so that when we fold it over, and we add the rest of the glue, and we fold it over, we don't run the risk of any cracking. So first I'm going to do my little bead, if my glue is going to cooperate with me. So here we go. Let's try this again. There we go. And then we're going to add glue to the tab. And I'm going to get a baby wipe. And I'm going to use my Teflon burnishing tool. And we're going to fold it over. Wipe up any glue. Give it a good burnish. And then we want to turn it to the other tab that's on the other end. Run a bead of the art glitter glue along the chipboard. Then add it to the tab. And making sure again wiping up any glue. There we go. Okay, now next part of this is when we attach this spine, and I'm just going to re-burnish the edge of my chipboard through the cardstock. When we add the spine to our cover, now the covers, the front and back cover are not covered with the artisan yet, but just for visual, this is what's happening. We need to put adhesive on our wings, and we're putting it on the good side of the cardstock. So I like to use dry adhesive for this purpose. I know some people are okay with using the art glitter glue. I prefer not to, and it's just a preference of mine. I like to use my dry adhesive, and I run one strip right along the edge of the cardstock. And then I take my second piece of adhesive, and I am using, I believe this is 5/8 that I'm using, but you can use whatever you might have. Again, like I say, it is a personal preference, and I am not putting it right tight to the chipboard. I'm probably leaving about a 1/16 of an inch here, just because I don't like the look of it when you can actually see the adhesive when you have your album put together. So we're going to repeat this on the other wing. And then we're going to add, and I like to do this before I miter, and I'll show you that in a second, because this way I get side to side coverage. Let's get this put away. See how long I managed to keep a somewhat clean work surface. So I'm going to burnish my score tape on both wings. And now what I am going to do is I want to miter these wings. And again, the reason we're going to miter the wings is we want to get rid of the bulk. And what you have to decide is, when you're mitering, which way can you cut away from the chipboard. So I always like to start right up here at the edge of the chipboard, cutting to the edge of the cardstock. I'm going to turn it over, and this one I have to cut on the good side, like so. And then I'm going to go back, because over here we need to use cut from the back side, because you're cutting away from the chipboard out to the edge of the cardstock. And one last time. And we'll get rid of our pieces. And then we're just going to set this aside so it has an opportunity to dry, meaning the liquid glue we used. So this is what you should have. Is your chipboard is down, you have your two wings, top and bottom are glued over, and you have your adhesive. And like I say, you only do this if you're using dry adhesive. If you weren't using dry adhesive and we're going to use the art glitter glue, then I would miter your corners, and then as you adhere it to the front and back cover, put your liquid adhesive down. So let's put this to the side, and then we're going to move on to our two pieces of chipboard that measure 5.5 by 7.5. And I have over here two pieces of red artisan cardstock that measure 7.5 by 9.5. And what you want to do to figure this out is you always add 2 inches to each measurement. So for the 5.5, because we need an inch at the top and an inch at the bottom, pardon me, an inch at the left side and an inch at the right side, you add 2 inches, which gives you 7.5. And then for the height, it's 7.5. Add an inch at the top and an inch at the bottom, which gives you 9.5. So I'm just going to slide this one up in here first. And again, I'm using my Scor Board as a tool. And this time all I need is my two 1-inch spacers. And that gives me my border, because you need to have enough material to wrap around the chipboard. And now I've burnished all this score tape and removing the backing. And then what we want to do is we're going to butt it up against the top, butt it up against the side, and then just lay it down like so. Remove your spacers, and I'm just going to leave them there because I'm going to need them again. Turn over your cardstock with the chipboard adhered to it and give it a good burnish. And all this white won't stick around. It's just more the burnishing tool. And remember, there's going to be paper over it. So we want to fold over, and again I'll remind you, if you're not using artisan, try a sample run just to make sure that it's not going to crack. And you have to know your cardstock. Not all cardstock is created equally, let me assure you. Now sides. So basically this is just repeating the same thing as we were doing on our spine piece, only we're just going to miter things not a lot different, but slightly. So there's one. So I am going to go ahead, and so now this time what we're going to do is we're going to run 3/8 along the edge of the cardstock and a 1/4 inch on the chipboard itself. And some people use the art glitter glue to do this. I prefer my dry adhesive. And maybe it's because I live in a dry climate, in the summer, but we get enough rain in the winter. And I'm going to work closest to me, so hopefully I can keep my head out of the camera shot. And if my head does get in the way, I apologize. I'll apologize now for if that happens. And then what we're going to do is you're going to use the 3/8 along the outer edge. And all I do with the 3/8 is I just add it so it just goes over that fold line we created. You don't need to go right to the edge. But if the only way you can remember is to go right to the edge, so what? It's okay. I just prefer to do it this way. But I like to add my adhesive before I remove my corners and do my mitering, because again, then I know I'm getting side to side coverage. And turn. And that's what we should have. And now we want to burnish all of the score tape. And I always like to burnish my score tape as soon as I put it down. That way I don't forget. And like I say, if you're having problems getting your score tape backing off your tape itself, it possibly means you just haven't burnished it enough. And I do like to give my score tape a very good burnish. I always say, if I take a little extra time now, I end up making a better project. So we're going to cut out the squares. So it's just like on the spine. We're going up to about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard and turning and then cutting the other fold line again up to that 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard, and we're going to repeat that on all 4 corners. And 2, and I hope you can see this. And 3, and here is our last one on this cover. There we go. So let's move those out of our way. And then we want to miter our corners, because when you miter your corners, you're taking away the bulk. And I just prefer that look to my album. Kind of gives your corner a finished look. And just repeat. And I have a little knobby here that I want to get rid of. Or because it bugs me. Any of you that know me know I suffer from a little bit of OCD. Some of you are probably laughing, going, that's a lot of OCD. Okay, and then you're just going to repeat the mitering of the corners on all remaining 3 sides. And I got one more left. Usually I forget one, and then after I've got the liquid glue on and my backing off my adhesive, I go, oh, now I gotta fix this. Trust me, it's better to do it before you take the backing off your adhesive and have the liquid glue on it. So get rid of those. And so this is what you should have. So there's the good side. And then if I turn it over and I show it from this way, so there's your mitered corners. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the backing off of all my 1/4 inch score tape first. And then I like to work with my 2 short sides first and then work with my long sides. And again, I'm going to run a bead of art glitter glue right along the edge of the chipboard. And then I'm going to use my burnishing tool and push that cardstock right up to the chipboard and then pull it over like so. Give it a good burnish along the side. Because like I say, just taking this extra time when we're making our covers gives your book its nice crisp look when you're all finished. And if you're going to go to the time and effort of making one of these beautiful memory keepers, as I call them, you want a quality product when you're done. And again, pull it over and burnish. If you can hear my heating system kicking in, I apologize. Hopefully it's not too loud. But we live in a climate where we have winter, so you need heat. So I'm going to repeat. So there's my glue, and I'm working on one of the long sides now. And all I'm doing is I'm pulling it over like so. Give it a good burnish and burnish. And last side for this one. And again, a bead of our glitter glue. And I'm going to burnish. And I see a little piece of teeny tiny bit of cardstock. So that's why I love my tweezers. And then pull it and get any glue wiped up. And then this particular burnishing tool has these little ridges, and I just like to run it along the edge of my cardstock and chipboard to give a nice crisp look. And if you have any, I call these, hope you can see that, this little bit of overhang a burr. If you have any of those, just take your scissors and ever so carefully give it a little snip. It happens. Don't get them on all corners. It really depends on how you manage to pull that little square that you cut out earlier. So let's repeat this on our other cover. So this is the piece that's 7.5 by 9.5. Putting our spacer along the top and along the side. And we've already put adhesive on the back of this chipboard. I already burnished it. And I'm going to put my pin back in my art glitter glue because we won't need that for a couple of seconds, minutes probably. Minutes more than seconds. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to butt our chipboard again right up to the top 1-inch spacer and this 1-inch spacer that is along the left-hand side. And lay it down, lift up your spacers, and we are done with them. So let's put them back in their home. Let's give this a good burnish. And then we're going to fold our cardstock. I always find it's much easier to pull away from yourself when you're trying to crease the fold. So what I mean by that is I sort of lay my chipboard and cardstock this way, and then I take whatever I'm going to burnish it with and pull it away from the chipboard to the edge of the cardstock. And last time for this side, and then we're going to go this way, again turning, and burnishing, and the last side, and last side. All right, now again we're going to add our adhesive. So I'm putting 3/8 along the edge of the cardstock, just going over that fold line, repeating on all 4 sides. And Tammy does sell the dry adhesive in the store. I believe it's under Scor Tape. Turn. Last side. And I think I've managed to keep my head out of the shot, which is good. So we're going to now put 1/4 inch along the edge of the chipboard. Turn and repeat on all 4 sides. Last piece. Just put this away. And then we're going to give our Scor Tape a good burnish. Turn. Can't remember if I did this side, so let's just do it again. I'd rather burnish a second time than not burnish enough. So again, we're going to take our scissors and we're cutting out the square. I hope you can see it. So it's what we created by folding our score lines. But I like to work from this side so I can actually see the edge or the corner of my chipboard, and I just go up to the X where those fold line of the 2 lines intersect. It should just fall out, or a little tug is all that's needed. Again, just go up, turn, two to go, cut up, turn again, there we go, last one, and done. Wow, those all fell out so nicely. That doesn't happen very often. So now we're going to fold it over and miter. And you want to miter each side. And make sure it's right up tight against the chipboard as you're folding. Because if not, then you're going to have a little hole. And that's what we don't want. And again. And let's get rid of our bits and pieces. And again, this is what we're left with. Or if you look at the good side, there's what you've got. So we're going to turn this over. Start removing my adhesive. So I take the 1/4 inch adhesive, backing off the chipboard. And I like to do that all at once so that when I'm folding, I am getting my full coverage. Then run the bead of art glitter glue along the edge of the chipboard. Then take your burnishing tool and pull. And if you have any glue, just wipe it up. It happens. Like so. Turn. And we're just repeating. And we're going to do this to all 4 sides. Like so. Making sure if there's any glue. And then we're going to turn. Remove the backing from the sides. Run the bead of glue. Take your burnishing tool, just like a recipe. Turn. And once you make a few of these, I just feel so great after I've got it all made. You want to make sure you got a good burnish going on up against the edge. And then take your burnishing tool and burnish all 4 sides. And then, like I say, I like to check for any burrs. There's one right there. So maybe you can see there. I think you can see it. So we're just going to cut that little burr away. And a teeny tiny one here too. Like I say, some people that doesn't bother me. I don't like it. So there's our front and back cover, whichever way you want to look at it. And we're just going to put our pin back in our glue, because there's nothing worse than going to get your glue and you are plugged. So when I adhere my front and back cover to my spine, it doesn't matter which one goes on which side. They're both going to go like that. I like to work with one side at a time. And I like to use my Scor Board to help me with this process. I like to do just a slight dry fit to make sure I'm going to be happy with everything. And I also when I'm going to lay down this cover piece, I always have it at an angle until I am happy with where things are, and then I drop it. So I'm going to remove the backing from this score tape. And I'm going to have it angled, making sure that I'm happy with everything, and then drop it down. And then I'm going to turn it, just move it over, because I would then want to take my other cover and do exactly the same thing. I'm making sure that I'm happy, that it's this right size. You know, I always try to check my chipboard after I cut it to make sure however many pieces I have that are making my cover are all the right height, because I have done that where my spine has been a slightly different height, and then I'm very upset with myself. I'm just lifting this a little bit because I'm not happy with how that was going down. I think I'm happy now. Yes. So we want to give this a good burnish. And then we're going to talk about, so remember we angled the spine piece, and we angled it because right along the edge of the front and back cover, you've got 2 layers of cardstock on your cover, and then you've got another layer that is on your wing. So that's 3 layers of material. That's why we want to make sure that we remove as much of the bulk as we possibly can. And then give it a good burnish. Hold your book up and say, wow, look at that. Look how close we are. That's amazing how we made something flat turn into a book cover or an album cover or a memory keeper or whatever it is you are going to use this album for. And if you find you've got something that's a little off, you can straighten it. And in that case, I'm okay. Yep, I'm good. So then what we need is, we need to reinforce this spine area. And I cut a piece of paper that I refer to as the spine reinforcement that is going to lay over this complete section. And I always like to have it just slightly wider than the wings. So I'm going to say about a ½ inch wider than the wings. So in this case, this was 5 inches wide, the piece that I used to cover the spine. I made my spine reinforcement piece 6 inches, so I have that ½ inch on either side. But for the height, this is 7.5, so I made this 7 3/8. Because it's going to go like so once we put adhesive on the back of it. So again, it measured 6 by 7 3/8. Just get rid of my little post-it note. And then again, I like to use dry adhesive for this purpose. And I've got this wide 2-inch stuff. So I'm going to use it and move this up so you can see. Start at this side so my head is not in the way. Hopefully I don't go over, and if I do, then we're going to do some trimming. And then we're going to go to the other side. Turn it around. Try and keep my head out of the camera shot. I always forget to do this before I start my tutorial. And then we sort of want to measure. You know what? In this case, this will fit quite nicely down the center. Nope, I don't like to overlap my score tape because I find when I do, I end up with a little bump and I don't like it. So I'm just gone to the 5/8 because I'm going to be happier. And some people do use the liquid glue. Some people don't use full coverage. That, again, is your personal choice. The reason I do full coverage with score tape is I don't like bubbles. Actually, I have a real problem with the bubbles that you might get if you don't. So what I'm talking about, when you don't use full coverage, you run the possibility of your cardstock bubbling when you put it down on to reinforce your spine area. And because I don't like that, I use full coverage. So I'm just taking a straight edge, just cutting away some of this overhang. That will just fold back. Okay, so we're going to give this another good burnish. And we're going to remove the adhesive backing. And what I like to make sure is if I have anything that's hanging over the edge of my cardstock, meaning any adhesive, I just like to fold it back on itself, because there's nothing worse, especially at the top and the bottom. Don't worry so much on the sides because you're going to have cardstock or pattern paper covering it eventually. Now I'm going to show you something, and maybe some of you caught it. When I ripped my score tape, I did not get any adhesive right along that edge. I am going to add just a teeny tiny little bit of our glitter glue there because I don't want it lifting. Get my book back in the way here. And sorry if that was right up in the camera. More. I'm happy now. So what you want to do is you want to hover over, let's just do this, your spine area with your piece of cardstock, making sure top to bottom you sort of have the same base, like so. And when you're happy, just let it lay down. Now remember, you are going to be putting pattern paper over this, so you're not even going to see most of it. And then this way. And then I like to use several different tools to make my book fold. And you want to do this gently, and knowing how much you can work your cardstock is extremely important. And because I am using Artisan, I am giving a fairly firm pressure, and the reason you want to do this is you're making sure that this piece of cardstock is adhering to the wing and going into that crease that is now the folding of your book. And I'll show you what that gives you on the outside in just a second. So just taking your time, using the edge. You don't want to use the point on the end, because if you do that, you're probably going to put a hole through your cardstock. And I have done that in the past. So let's just, going to work this a little more. Going to use this one. And like I say, I use several different score tools to do this. And there we go. There is the cover of our memory book. So let's move on, and we're going to work on the hinge for the 3 pages we are going to have in this particular mini album, memory keeper, whatever we're going to call it today. So I've cut a piece of cardstock for the hinge, set the book aside, that measures 4 1/4 by 7. And I like a 5/8 inch gusset. Just gives me a little bit more space to work with when I'm adding embellishments and things like that. And I do sometimes run into a problem where I end up with that alligator book going on. And this is what has helped me to avoid that. So I've already pre-done my scoring, but I'm going to walk through it with you. So I scored at 1/2, 1, 1 5/8. So this is my first hinge. This is my gusset. Then I'm scoring at 2 1/8, 2 5/8 for my second hinge, and then 3 1/4 because that creates my gusset. And then my last hinge is 3 1/4 and 3 3/4. So that's your folding for your hinge. And I like to, sometimes I end up putting the adhesive on first, sometimes I fold and then go back and put the adhesive on. So I am folding over all of my score lines that are going to create my hinges. And I always like to fold back on the paper, so I keep a straight score line and I keep a straight fold. So there's my score lines folded so far. I am going to use 3/8 inch score tape. I know some people like to use the liquid adhesive. Again, this is my preference. So I'm adding score tape to one side of each of my hinges. And I always put my score tape on the outside edge, because when I fold it over, I want the edge to be secure, so that when my hinge is standing up, it's secure at the base. And I don't have a 1/4 inch wing. Tammy showed us how to do this, and I much prefer the look of this when it's in the book. It looks finished. You don't wonder, what is that 1/4 inch sticking out? So there's 2, and I'm just going to turn it around. No, I'm going to work from this side. And here goes my last piece of score tape down on my last hinge, like so. And then I'm going to burnish and burnish and burnish again. And I'm going to remove my score tape from each hinge one at a time. So what I'm doing right now is I'm folding the hinge back like so. And I'm going to burnish it. And then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to stand it up. So there's my first hinge. There's my gusset. I'll do this. There's my second hinge. And there's going to be my third hinge. Okay, so we're going to turn it back over so we're working on the wrong side. So I'm removing my score tape from my second hinge. And again, I am going to fold over, making sure that everything is even side to side. Fold it down, give it a good burnish, and then I'm going to create the actual hinge. So I folded it back. So the gusset, I folded back. And there is your second hinge. So now we've made 2 hinges. And now we're going on to our very last hinge. Move the backing. And again, I'm going to work with it so that I'm folding over. And burnish it well. Stand it up. Give it a good burnish. Burnish, burnish. Fold it back. Fold it back. And fold it back. Because you want your hinges to go both directions. So when it's in the book, you want it to be able to go to the left. And you want it to be able to go to the right. Like so. And so we are going to give it a really, really good burnish. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to go back and I am going to put some adhesive. So there's your hinges on the back side of the 2 gussets I created. So remember these 2 gussets that are here? I'm folding in my hinge, folding that one over, turning it over, everything laying flat. And now what we want to do is we want to put adhesive on these 2 gussets on the back side. So this is what's going to adhere this hinge into your book. Again, some people like to use the liquid adhesive. I prefer to use dry adhesive. And I'm going to use 1/2 inch because my gussets are 5/8. And I just run it straight down the middle of the back side of the gusset. And you're going to have to work it, get it to lay flat again so that you can rip your adhesive. And if you're wondering, where did I get my 3.5 inch Tim Holtz ruler? Well, if you follow me, you know that I broke a Tim Holtz ruler. And my dear husband cut it for me. And it is the perfect size to tear my dry adhesive or score tape. So we want to burnish like so. And that is all there is. And some of you are going to say, oh, that's all there is. After you make a few of these, they're not so scary anymore. Trust me. So there's what you're left with. And I always like to make sure that I'm happy with it, that it's nice and square. 1.25 inches at the top, 1.25 inches at the bottom. Remember, we made our spine 2.5. So I technically have 1/4 inch on either side in my book. I have 1/4 inch on either side of my hinge. Plus I have my gusset, my score, my fold, whatever you want to call where we folded the book. So this is going to sit like so. but we need to decide on some pattern paper that is going to go under this. Okay, so we wanted to get a piece of pattern paper to lay down underneath our spine piece before we put it in, because I just find it gives a nicer finish to my book. So we're going to remove the spine, and I chose the feathers because that's what I was kind of leaning towards. And I cut a piece, so when I cut my spine piece, so my pattern paper for my spine, remember we're going to have this fold. So I always cut my spine pattern paper piece to the same size as the spine. So in this case the spine was 2 inches, so I cut my pattern paper to 2 inches. But I take 1/8 of an inch off the top and off the height, so it's 7 3/8 because the height of my book is 7 1/2. And then I'm just going to center it top to bottom, dry fit, and I'm happy with that. I will add this with some liquid adhesive. And I could have used this other side because it looks nice too, but I kind of thought the feathers. Okay, probably put too much glue on this as usual, but that's the way I roll. So you just want to make sure top to bottom, side to side. And that's what I like about the art glitter glue, is it gives you a little wiggle room. You want to make sure you can still close the book, that we're not impeding on the fold line, because that would not be a good thing. Burnish it well, because remember, your hinge is going to be sitting on top of this. Burnish. As I said before, the more time you spend with this, getting everything together, the better things are going to be down the road as you add pages. Now, you want to center your hinge that you're adding to your book, top to bottom, side to side, and you want to make sure that it's straight. So I want to make sure that I have 1/4 of an inch on the left and right side, and because this is a 1/2 inch smaller than my book, so my hinge is 7 inches, I want about 1/4 of an inch at the top and 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. And unfortunately I don't think there's any way for me to do this that my head is not going to get into the camera, so hopefully, so actually I led you down the wrong path. So it's actually 3/8 of an inch that you're going to want, I believe. Let's just see what I have on this side. Yes, it's 3/8 of an inch on either side, not 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to bring this back over here. Yes, I'm 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to use my pencil, draw some lines. Down here and make sure I'm happy with that. Yes. And then just, so it is 1/4 of an inch from the top and the bottom. Draw a little line at the top, maybe a line at the bottom, whatever you need to draw. Remember, with a pencil you can always erase it. So that's what you're left with, is I've got my lines on. And then I'm going to be adhering this down. Got to find my line at the bottom, my line at the top. I might turn this around just for now, just because I think I can see the line, this line a little better than the other line. So again, just take your time with the dry fitting. This is not a race. And the more time you take to do this, the happier you're going to be. And I tend to just like to take a little bit of my adhesive off at a time. That's the other reason I like the dry adhesive. And if I really mess up, I do have the ability to take out my hinge without wrecking my whole book. So let's get this where we want it again. Happy there, happy there. Can I see? I want this over more this way and a little bit this way. So I'm looking at all those little lines that I made. Sorry for the head. And if I'm happy, which I believe I am, I'm just going to tack it for a second. I'm probably going to just move it over just, maybe it'll be fine. Just let me see what I got going on here. Yes, I am happy. So now I'm going to pull on my two backings of my adhesive. And what should happen is it should just basically fall into place like so. Just tack it down a little bit. Sorry if my head got in the way. And I'm just going to hold it up to make sure I still am happy. Yes, I am. So now I'm going to burnish it. And burnish again. And there's our hinge in our book, our album, our memory keeper, whatever word you like to use to describe. And like I say, if you've got some lines that you don't want to see, take your eraser and you can erase them. And that really was the only one. There's a little bit down here that's kind of bugging me, and there it goes, it's gone. Just get the eraser stuff off. And there we are. There's the book with the hinges in it. And we're just going to set this aside because we're going to work on the pages. So we said we were making 3 pages for this mini album. These base pages, as I call them, measure 7 by 10. So they're 7 inches by 10 inches. And on the 10-inch side, you want to score at 5 on all 3 pieces. So I'm going to fold my score lines of each of my pages. And what I'm doing is, remember, a score line is just your guide. Make sure that they're straight, and then crease your score line, and then burnish your score line. And I can't say it enough. If you burnish your score lines well, that gives you a nice, crisp page. So that was 1. And now we're going to do our second one. And burnish. That's 2. And our last one. And I've had people say, which way do you fold your paper? Well, with the Artisan, it doesn't really matter, but I've always folded. So I put my score line here. So this was the side that my stylus went down as I was scoring. So when I fold my paper, I always fold away from that score line. So I fold into the divot, if that makes sense. I'll show you on another piece of paper as we move on with this album. Only thing I find with this red, it is really, really hard to make sure that you're square. It's kind of hard to see the edges. So there's 3. So let's get the book back because we're going to adhere these pages. Now, remember I said that our hinge was 7 inches tall? And we make our pages exactly the same height. So if your hinge is 7 inches tall, your page needs to be 7 inches tall because of the way we're going to adhere these pages. So I'm going to lay it down. So what I'm doing is I'm butting the edge of my page right up to the edge of the hinge. And then I'm folding the first hinge over. I'm making sure that I'm happy. And if I am, then I'm going to add my adhesive. I'm happy with the way it looks at the top and the bottom. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to hold everything in place. Take your glue pin out of your glue before you get started. I'm going to fold it back and I'm going to run a bead of glue, not the straightest bead, but that's okay, along my hinge. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it down on the page, like so. Now before it dries, I'm going to make sure, yeah. So what I was checking for was to make sure I had no overhang on here. If I didn't need to do any adjustments, which I didn't. So now I'm going to give it a good burnish. I'm going to check to make sure I didn't have any glue leak out any place, because you want to get that cleaned up. It makes quite a mess. Now what we're going to do is we're going to close, not run it on the, just run a bead of glue along the bottom of the page, and then we're going to run glue on this side of the hinge. I will wipe up the glue that is here. It's just a little bit. And then you just want to fold it, making sure you're happy. Burnishing. And he seeps out. This is the time to deal with it. A white piece of paper always comes in handy for this, because then if any glue is seeping out, it's going to go on your white piece of paper. It's easier to see. If you follow me, you know that I often use a white piece of paper when I'm constructing, because it just lets me see where the edge of things are. And if we're happy, which we are, make it work for us. Yes, there we go. And these lay flat. That's why I like putting my hinges in my albums this way. So now we're going to go on to page 2. So I work from the back of the book to the front of the book. So this is going to be page 2. And again, I'm dry fitting to make sure top to bottom we're okay. I'm folding. Whoops, I moved it. Let's start this all over again. Dry fit. Make sure we're happy. And now what I'm checking is I'm making sure that on this outside edge, and I'm going to get this white paper behind my first page so that we can see. What I'm trying to do here is make sure that my page is nice and square, that the top of my page and my bottom of my page are nice and square, because this is the time to watch for that, because even if you're off a little bit over here on your hinge, nobody's going to see it by the time the pattern paper is down. So I'm going to open everything up, keeping everything in place, get my glue. Wish I was left-handed for this purpose. Get some glue there. And then what we want to do is we want to lay this down on the actual page. So we're laying the hinge down on our base page. Give it a good burnish. We're not in a rush. The more time we spend on the mechanics of the book, the nicer the book is. Give it a good burnish. Wipe out any extra glue. So we're going to run a bead of glue along the edge of the base page, then a bead of glue down the other side of the hinge. And this is the point, and you don't have to even decide this right now. So some people like to put tags in the top of their albums. I sometimes do. I sometimes don't. Sometimes I use those places as a spot to add extra pictures. And if I don't need the space, then I will glue it shut. Sometimes I don't even glue it shut, I just leave it. Because you never know what little paraphernalia things you're going to have as a token that you want to remember whatever event it was. And again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We want to make sure that our page is top to bottom, nice and square, nice and flush. And we might have to adjust it a little bit, like I had to move it just ever so little. And again, nobody's going to see that down at the hinge. Trust me. So add your art glitter glue, like so, and fold it over. Burnish. Stand up your glue before you end up with a puddle. And then find that burnishing tool. Give it a good burnish. Looking good. Then again, get your paper under so you can see, plus so run a bead of art glitter glue along the edge and give the spine, or the hinge I should say, of this. There we go. And fold it. And take your, I'm a little crooked, so let me start this again. And again, like I say, because we're using the art glitter glue or liquid adhesive for this part of the process, it gives you that time to move things if you have to. And I will say, your adhesive is your own personal choice. Okay, and just like that, for this, just like that, we have 3 pages, lay flat pages, in our album. Love it. And there we go. 3 pages ready to have flips and flaps put on them. And like I say, we'll come back and we'll decide later if we want to actually put in photo mats. And sometimes I don't put photo mats in here right away, especially if I'm not sure how much paper I'm going to have, pattern paper I'm going to have. So what I'm working with today is I'm working with a collection kit from this EcoPart Lumberjack, which is 12 pieces of cardstock, and then I have a 6x6 paper pad that I'm using. So I will just hold off putting my photo mats in the top for the time being, and decide probably when I'm getting ready to when I'm down to the part of I'm matting pages. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to start with the front of page 1. So I refer always to my pages is page 1 front, page 1 back, page 2 front, page 2 back, page 3 front, page 3 back. Okay, And you'll see that when you get to the instructions down at the section where I call it flaps and pockets. So I am putting a pocket on this page. Get my fingers to work. Okay. And my pocket that I'm putting on this page measures 2.5 by 6 less a 16th. And you're going, 6 less a 16th, what is that? So what I want you to do is when you put this in your cutter, just back it up, like just a hair. So I'll use this cutter. So there's the 6, and all I did is I just back it up, just a hair. So just a hair under 6. And I do that because we don't want our pocket to overhang our page. We want to make sure our pocket fits the page. So I'm going to stick my white piece of paper in there. Tell you the score lines now. So on the 2.5-inch side, you're scoring at 1/2. Then you're rotating it, and you're scoring at 1/2 on the 6-inch side. And then you're flipping it completely around, so you're still on the 6-inch side, and you're scoring at 1/2. And when I say you're still on the 6-inch side, your 6-inch side is along the top. Okay? So we're going to fold on those score lines. We're going to burnish those score lines. And remember, nice crisp score lines. Make everything lay the way it's supposed to lay. Okay, and then I'm going to do some mitering. So my instructions say, burnish the score lines, miter the corners. So what I mean by that is, do you see where this X is? Where the fold lines intersect? I want to take my scissors and I am cutting right through that X. Just like that. So I'll show you on this other side. I am cutting straight through the X. And what I'm doing is I'm taking away any bulk. And then I want to miter the top of the tab. Don't cut into the actual pocket. And again, just from the score line out to the edge, like so. And then I'm going to re-burnish my score lines. Like so. Then I'm going to bring my book in here. And I'm going to dry fit it, because what I don't want to have happen is I don't want my pocket to be hanging over the edge, and I also don't want my pocket to be getting in the way of folding my page. And I'm happy with all of that. So I also like to make sure that my pocket is as far to the right hand side of the page, because again that won't impede the turning of the page. And I always add adhesive only to my bottom tab. And then I'm going to line up with the bottom of the book, and this is where this white piece of paper comes in handy. There we go. No, want it down a little bit, but not hanging over. When you are happy, which I am, we're going to give it a good burnish. And then I like to take a piece of just tape and I lay it over that 1/2-inch tab, because then when I'm putting my inserts, my photo mats, into the pocket, it's not going to catch on this little bit of lip from the 1/2-inch tab. And now I'm going to put adhesive on my 2 side tabs, folding it up, making sure I'm still happy, getting my wipe, because this is a good time to catch any glue, and then give it a good burnish, and burnish. And that is our pocket, ready to have something put into it. But we're also putting a flap at the top of this page, like so. So that flap that's going at the top of the page measures, let's start with this measurement, 5 by 5 less that 1/16. So you're just going to back it up just a little bit. And then what you want to do with that 5 less that 1/16, put it into your scoreboard. Let me turn this over so it's going the right way. So the 5 less the 1/16 is along the top of your scoreboard, and you are going to score at 1/2. So we're going to fold on this score line, and this is the time if you want to miter any corner or round any corners to do that. I am going to round corners because I definitely like that look. And I think I'm going to use my Crocodile corner chopper, and I'm going for the 1/4 of an inch. Tammy does sell these in the store. So give it a good burnish. Oh, let's miter first, and then we'll just do the burnish. So we're going to miter that 1/2 inch tab. And the reason we're mitering these 1/2 inch tabs, let me get the book back in, is because this tab goes from the right hand side of the page to the left hand side of the page. And we want to turn it to make sure we're going to be happy. And I believe I am. I just need to turn it one more time. Yes, I will be. So I'm going to turn my book upside down because I find it's easier working with the book upside down when I'm putting things on the top of a page. And I am going to gain dry fit. And if I am happy, I like to just lift up the flap, add the adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab, and then put it back into position, making sure not to get anything in the way of this side of the page, so the left hand side of this page. And when I'm happy, I'm going to burnish it. I think I'm happy there. Give it another burnish, because that is the key. Lots and lots of burnishing. Any glue. Make sure your page will turn, and it does. I'm happy with that. Okay, so we've done that part. So now we need to make the photo mats that are going to go in this pocket. And because there's lots of 3x4 cut aparts in this paper line, I decided I was going to have several 3x4 mats. So they're 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, and I cut 2. And then I cut a booklet that measures 6 1/4 by 8 1/2, and on the 8 1/2 inch side I scored at 4 1/4. So I'm going to fold on that score line. I am going to get my white paper under it so I can see a little bit better. For some reason the red on the blue is difficult for me to see. And when I have it folded, I give it a good burnish. And now I'm going to round. I'm only going to round 2 corners on the booklet. But on my single photo mats, I'm going to do the 4 corners. And what I like about the choppers, or the Crop-A-Dial corner chopper, is you can do several at a time. So I did both of them at the same time, and that makes me happy. And what we're doing is we're using the booklet to keep the flap closed, like so. And then our 2 small photo mats are just going to go in beside each other like that. So that is the front of page 1 complete. We're going to turn to the back of page 1. And the back of page 1 is another pocket, but this pocket is going to be on this side, and it's going to be on a flap that opens. So the pocket is going to be on the left-hand side of the back of page 1. So let's take our little label off of it. I'll give you some measurements, and I'm going to turn my page of my instructions. And so we're going to start with the flap. And the flap measures 5 by 7. Now I did not cut it shorter than the base page because I'm going to dry fit, and if I am hanging over it all, I can take it back to the cutter and I can take a little slice off of it if I need to. And I'm not hanging over it all, so I am happy there. So we're going to go back to our scoreboard with the 5-inch side along the top. You're going to score at 1/2. You're going to fold on that score line. You're going to burnish that score line. I'm not going to miter these, no, I am going to miter these corners because I'm putting the pocket on this side. So I'm going to round, sorry, round my corners, give my score line a good burnish, miter my tabs, like so. And then I'm going to adhere the flap to the left-hand side of the back of page 1. And what I am doing is I am making sure top to bottom I'm not hanging over my page, and on this left-hand side I'm not hanging over the edge of the base page. Then I'm going to flip out my tab, add the adhesive, keeping everything still, flip my tab back in, and I just moved, so that's okay, we can fix this. Making sure that everything is straight, nothing's hanging over the edge of the page, and if we're happy, give it a good burnish. I usually start with a finger, then move to the tool. And as you can see, I have a couple of different burnishing tools that I like to use. Sometimes I use more than one. I just find some work better at certain applications. Give it a good burnish when it's closed. And there's your flap on the back of page 2. Now I have this pocket, and this pocket is measuring 4 1/4 by 8. So on the 4 1/4 inch side, I scored at 1/2. Then I turned it to the 8-inch side. I scored at 1/2. Then I turned it completely around to the other end of the 8-inch side and scored again at 1/2. And this is just like the pocket we put on the front of page 1. We're going to burnish our score lines. Like so. We're going to bring the book back in, and we are going to dry fit, making sure that we're happy. We're not over either the top of the page or the bottom of the page, and I am not. I'm going to miter my corners of my pockets, so those 1/2-inch tabs are going to get a miter. So the corners at the bottom, I cut straight through the X. And then at the top, cutting away from the fold line or the score line. And again, like so. And we're going to get rid of the bits and pieces. We're going to again burnish all those score lines. I'm going to bring the book back in. Going to put my white piece of paper underneath so we can see. And then I am going to do another dry fit. It's just what I do. Like so. And if I'm happy, which I am, I'm going to flip out my tab, add adhesive only on the one long tab. My glue has a mind of its own. And making sure nothing has moved. Opening it up. Give it a little burnish with your finger. Find my wipe. Okay, we're just going to look here for a second. Turn it. And burnish. Make sure you're not hanging over, which we're not. Burnish. And again, I am going to take some tape. I'm just going to put it over my little 1/2-inch tab so that my photo mats will slide in easily. And fold it up. And I am very happy with everything. Everything's nice and square. Add adhesive to those 1/2-inch side tabs. Wipe any glue that might get on there like that, because you don't want to glue your pocket shut. And then I'm going to just fold it up, tuck them in, and lay it down. And give it a good burnish. And there is your pocket that is on the flap, that's on the back of page 2. And we have 2 photo mats to go in this pocket, and they measure 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And I am going to round my corners using the 1/4 inch side of my crocodile corner chomper. And so they are going to go in here like so. And that is the front of page 1, the back of page 1, and now we're moving on to the front of page 2. So on the front of page 2, we are making a flap that flips up, and on the front of that flap you're going to have 2 flaps that flip to the left and to the right. So I'll give you the measurement to the flap that flips up. It measures 5, pardon me, 5, getting ahead of myself, by 7.5, and I did trim off like a 1/16 of an inch, like just a hair, and we will dry fit because that's what I have to do. And then on the 7.5-inch side, I scored at 1/2. So let's fold on that score line. I want my corners rounded. I'm going to dry fit first, and I'll explain why. So I like to just make sure that nothing is going to cause me any problems, and when I round my corners I can't see that then. So I'm just going to turn the book around this way. So the book is now upside down. I'm just kind of making sure that there, and where's that white piece of paper gone? Right there. And nothing's hanging over, so I would be okay with all of this. So I'm going to miter my 1/2-inch tab on both sides, because this piece goes from the left to the right, right across. And then I'm going to round my corners with my 1/4 inch. And I'm going to lay this back down. I'm going to make sure that it's right over there. I'm not going to be getting in the way of this flap, making the book not fold correctly. And if I'm happy, I'm going to flip out the tab, add my adhesive, flip this tab back under, and I move something. That's okay, we have plenty of time. Making sure, happy, glue. So just give it a slight burnish right now, because we're going to turn the page. That's critical. If there's a problem, we still have time. We can lift it up. It's artisan. And everything turned nicely. Remember, it's a little stiff at the beginning, but as you turn it more, it relaxes. And smooth that. Give it a good burnish. There we go. And there we are. So we're going to get our 2 flaps that I talked about. So we have 2 flaps that are going on the top of this flap, and they measure 4.5 by 5 3/4, and on the 4.5-inch side I scored each of them at 1/2. So they're each scored at 1/2. So let's burnish those score lines. Burnish your second score line. I'm going to round my corners. I am not going to miter my tabs, because what's going to happen here is, let's get this piece of paper under. So I put the piece of paper under just the flap right now. We're going to center one flap, and I'm starting with the left-hand side, top to bottom, or you can off-center them. You could do something like this. Actually, I kind of like that. Maybe that's what I'm going to do this time. I think I am going to do that. I quite like that. All right. See, that's the joys of. So we are going to add adhesive to our 1/2 inch tab. So you could either follow my instructions, which say center these two flaps top to bottom, or you can go rogue, which is what I'm going to do right now, and offset them. And remember, if you make this album, please make sure to go to my Facebook group and post pictures of your completed album. And you can also post pictures at Country Craft Creations, or the Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creation. And I'll have those links both in the description box. So there's one flap on. So all I am doing with flap number 2 is I'm sort of just where the flap starts to or the corner starts to round. That's where I'm adhering this one down, because it's about not quite 1/4 inch. So probably want to go maybe a little lower. Not much lower because I don't have any more room. So that's as far as it's going to go. So again, I don't need to miter because it's not going right to the bottom and it's not going right to the top. I'm just going to turn the book so that I can see. And then I'm going to make sure I'm not over the flap, because that's not what you want. You want it just on the edge, like so. Wipe up any glue and give everything a good burnish. Like so. And then we are going to use a magnet to hold this shut. You could take a piece of ribbon and tie it completely around and close this. Or you could use a magnet. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to wait and decide if it's going to be a magnet or a piece of seam binding. I'm kind of thinking maybe seam binding. Kind of liking that look. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to remind myself I want to put a magnet here or some type of closure. So that's what that means. My little circle with a line through it, that there's going to be either a magnet or seam binding. So I'm just going to hold off on my magnets for right now since I changed one thing. And so that is the completed. We're not putting a magnet to hold down this flap because there'll be enough weight from the top flaps once there's pattern paper on it to hold everything down. So now we're moving to the back of page 2, and the back of page 2 is a flap that's going to sit at the bottom of the page with an angle pocket on top of that flap. So give you the measurements of what we're going to be using here. So the first measurement is for the actual flap, and it measures 5 by 5.5, and on the 5-inch side we scored at 1/2. And then the angle pocket that's going to sit on top of it measures 5.5 by 6.5. So on the 6.5-inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. Then you are going to rotate your paper to the 5.5 inch side. You are going to score at 1/2, and you are going to turn it completely around to the other end, so you're still on the 5.5 side, and score at 1/2. And we are just going to do a little burnishing of these 3 score lines. It doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm just folding and burnishing score lines. So I'm doing the angle, the pocket first. Okay, so just set that aside for a second, and then let's do the flap. So we're going to fold on its 1/2 inch score line. We aren't mitering any corners here because of the fact that there's going to be a pocket on top of it. We don't want to have a hole at the bottom of our pocket. Or maybe you do. That would be your choice. And this pocket is going to sit right at the bottom of the page, like so. I am going to round this corner of my pocket, and I'll explain why I'm going to do that once we create the angle. But that's all I'm going to miter around on this particular piece. So with the tabs on the back, we only have to miter tab that is the 1/2 inch tab, the bottom of it. And if it makes it easier for you, just miter the top of it too. You can miter all your tabs. It doesn't matter. Whatever works for you. You don't have to miter any tabs if you don't want to. So this is going to adhere to the back of page 2 like so. So let's put our adhesive on it. And then we are going to, making sure we're not going over. And again, this is a good time to put your white piece of paper underneath so you can see what you're doing. Burnish it. And there's your flap on the back of page 2. So we're going to set the book aside, and we're going to take that pocket that we made. Remember, we scored and we folded and did all of that. So we're going to, just for right now, we are going to cut through our X's that are at the bottom. Remember, don't cut into your pocket. So just cut out the bulk. Give them a burnish so that everything's laying flat. And you're going to want your ruler because we're going to create an angle pocket. So I know that I want to measure 2.5 up from the bottom of the pocket. So this is the bottom of the pocket, and on the right hand side of the pocket I am measuring up 2.5 inches. And I'm just going to put a little mark there with my pencil. So it's a tiny, tiny little mark. And then on the left-hand side, at the top of my pocket, with my flaps folded under, I'm going to measure in 1 inch, which is there. Now, I'm going to get my small scoreboard or cutter. And that's what I like about this cutter, is the fact that it has a wire in it, and I can see once I get everything lined up. So I'm taking that little tick mark, I'm putting it right in the cutting groove, and this little tick mark is in the cutting groove. Then I'm going to lay it down my arm and do a little bit more adjusting because I want my wire to be lining up with those marks. And when I'm happy, hold it tight because you're cutting through a couple of layers of paper, and cut your angle. And that is the easiest way that I have found to angle a pocket. So I'm just going to take my eraser, in case there's any pencil marks still. Get rid of them now. So now I'm going to take and miter these two angles. Like so. Because no tutorial is ever perfect, we need to talk about our angle pocket. So I am going to put a little note here. Our angle pocket should have measured 5.5 by 6, and I will put a notation in the tutorial back when I first gave you these measurements, just so we correct our problem. Better too high than too short, I'll always say, and it wouldn't be a tutorial without something like this happening. So remember that it's not 5.5 by 6.5, it's 5.5 by 6. Everything else is okay. It's just I cut my pocket too tall, and that's okay. So I'm putting my white piece of paper underneath it. So now I only rounded the one corner on the flap because the other corners all have a pocket adhered to it. So I'm going to start just with my bottom tab, adding adhesive to it. Might be a bit much there. And then I'm going to line everything up so I'm happy. And I did dry fit this. Like so. Making sure we're happy. And then we're going to wipe up any glue, and we're going to burnish. Like so. You know, when I was writing out my cutting instructions or my cutting guide, I looked at this pocket a couple of times and went, no, not big enough. No, too big. So, like I say, better to have a little too big, because then you just have to cut the 1/2 inch off the top. So if you got that far and you were watching the tutorial and hadn't printed the cutting guide, it's okay. We fixed it. So we're going to add some tape to the bottom. And as I always say, that makes us human. And I just like to give it a good burnish. Some people don't want to put the sellotape or the tape down. I do. And again, if you don't want to put the tape on the inside of your pocket, that's your choice. So now I'm putting 1/2 inch glue on those 1/2 inch tabs. I realized I didn't miter this one, so that's easy to fix. There we go. And the bottom is mitered, so we're happy there. So we'll just put some glue along this side. I think I'm out of the shot. Let's move me in here so you can actually see. Sorry. There we go. And now when we fold it up, tuck them in, lay them down, and there is your angled pocket on the top of a flap. Give it a good burnish. Okay, and then we're just going to move the book for a second so we can talk about the photo mats. So I have 2 photo mats for this pocket, and they measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. A piece of red. And we are going to round the corners, and I'm doing 2 at a time. And our photo mats are going to go into our pocket, except when you have a little bit of glue. Let's double check that there's no glue that's going to keep them stuck, keep them in there. And there you are. So your photo mats are just going to peek out of this angle pocket. You could make this angle, like I say, you could angle the whole thing. It's totally your choice. There we go. So there's the back of page 2. And now we're moving on to the front of page 3. And the front of page 3, gotta turn my page, consists of 2 flaps, a bigger flap and a smaller flap. And so we'll start with the measurements of the smaller flap. So it measures 4 1/2 by 5 1/4, and on the 4 1/2 inch side you're scoring at 1/2. And your larger flap measures 5 by 6, and on the 5 inch side you're scoring at 1/2. Fold on our score lines, get my burnishing tool, one and 2, and we're going to round some corners. I'm not going to miter the corners on these tabs because they don't need to be. So what we're doing is we're offsetting these flaps, sort of like what we did on this page over here. These flaps were the same size, but this time we've got one that's a little bigger and one that's a little smaller, so we're going to see a lot more of the bottom flap. So I'm putting the smaller flap on my left hand side, and I'm putting the bigger flap on my right hand side, and that totally, again, totally is your preference. So I'm going to do the bigger flap first, and we're going to kind of make it be closer to the bottom, about 1/4 inch from the bottom, I think is what I'm going to do. That again gets down to being your choice. You could center it. Let's get this piece of paper underneath here so I can see a little bit better. So I'm doing it about 1/4 inch from the bottom. Hopefully my head's not in the way. Make sure we're not overhanging, and we're not. Give it a good burnish. And the burnishing tool. Got any glue? This is the time to get rid of it. And then we have our flap that goes on the left hand side, the smaller flap, and it's going to be about the same distance from the top. I'm going to actually turn my book upside down so that I can see. So I put the big flap up about 1/4 inch, give or take, and I'm going to put my smaller flap down about 1/4 inch from the top. Again, put your glue on the 1/2 inch tab, line everything up. I'm happy with it there. You don't want to be over the edge of the page because you still want your book to turn, or your page to turn, I should say. The book turns. Yes, I guess the book does turn. So let's just make sure that we're going to be happy. Yes. And yes. Get rid of any glue. Give it a real good burnish. And then this one for sure, I am going to use a magnet to keep it closed. I only used 2 magnets, and like I say, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do here. If I'm going to leave it and put a seam binding, or if I'm going to use a magnet. But here I do want to use a magnet because I know I want to put a cut apart on this page as a decorative element. So I'm getting a positive and a negative. These are large magnets, and Tammy sells these in the store. I am going to decide which one will go where. Doesn't matter, because it's the only magnet right now in the book. And if I'm happy, I always like to put a little score tape over my magnets, just in case they move. Never have had the problem. And then the other magnet is going on the base page itself, because it keeps everything closed. Okay. So you just want to slide it, because you don't want it pulling and tearing anything. Put your adhesive down. Burnish that adhesive. And then close the big flap, close the small flap, and there it is. So I'm just going to go back to this other page. So if we were going to use a magnet here, what we were worried about is making sure that our 2 magnets don't attract to each other. So let me get out 2 magnets. In this case, whatever magnet I put here, I want it to repel off of this magnet. And you see how it's kind of wanting to flip over that way? So it'd be this side of the magnet I'm going to want to use that's going to be down, because it's repelling from my magnet that's holding these 2 flaps down. So in this case, this is the magnet I'm going to put down, and I'm actually going to put the other side of it on the right flap, and I'm centering it, keeping it in about a thumb's width. Get some adhesive. So if I change my mind and decide I'm going to go to seam binding, I can just remove this magnet. But for the purposes of what I want to show you right now, I'm just going to do so. And we're going to definitely add some extra adhesive, because we don't want this magnet fighting. So what we've done is, so now I have a magnet on the front of page 2, and I have a magnet on the front of page 3. Because I made sure that they weren't attracted to each other, meaning the pieces that meet together, I guess is how I want to say it, my pages aren't sticking together as I turn my book. So I hope that kind of makes sense, and maybe in a future tutorial or video I'll go into that magnet thing a little bit more. Okay, so let's move on to the back of page 3. And on the back of page 3, we're making 2 pockets. One is going to sit near the top, and the other one is going to sit right at the bottom. So I'm going to give you some measurements. So the pockets themselves measure 2.5 by 6, and I backed this up just a little bit. So when I was cutting it, it's just a hair less than 6. And then what you want to do is on the 2.5 inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. Then you are going to rotate to the 6 inch side, score at 1/2, and then turn it completely around and score at 1/2 again. And you are going to do that to both of your pockets. And then we are going to fold on the score lines, burnish on the score lines, and this one again, and one more time. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do some mitering. We are going to cut straight through that X to get the bulk out of the corners. Miter them at the top. And repeat that on your second. And like so. All right, so burnish those score lines again, because you want it to be nice and flat. Repeat on the second pocket. All right. So we're going to start with the pocket that we're putting at the bottom of the page because it's the easy one to put on. And we are going to make sure it's not hanging over the edge of the base page on your left-hand side. And also making sure it's not hanging over the bottom of the base page. So I'm only putting adhesive on the long tab, the one that goes at the bottom of the page. I'm going to make sure that I keep as much as possible everything to the left, but not hanging over the page, because we don't want to impede the folding of our book. And give it a good burnish. Make sure you're happy. Yep. Whoops, let's get rid of all this extra glue. And that's okay. Nobody's going to see it. And again, I'm going to use a piece of tape. Lay it across my 1/2 inch tab, just so my little photo mats are going to slide in and out without getting caught up on that tab. Add adhesive to the smaller 1/2 inch tabs on the left and the right hand side of the pocket. Fold them up. I always like to fold my book. Everything's folding nicely. Burnish them well. So now here's where you want to do, so there's your bottom pocket on. So here's where you want to do a little measurement. I know that my page is 7 inches long. So 1/2 of 7 is 3.5. So I'm just going to measure up 3.5, and I'm just going to draw a line. And that is going to be my guide to put down my second pocket, because I want to make sure that I have enough space for these little photo mats that are going in my pocket. So what you should end up with is about 1/4 of an inch, because the photo mat is 3 1/4 wide. So we should have 3.5 inches to the top, And for some reason I don't, so let me do this measurement again. So there is 3.5. So let's erase my first line because it was not quite. So 3.5 is right there. And I'm going to draw myself a little line. Then I'm going to take this pocket and I'm going to lay it down, and we're going to try this one more time. I want to make sure that my cards are not, my little photo mats aren't going to be over the top of my page, and they'll be just fine. So again, we're going to add our adhesive only to the big tab that's along the bottom of the pocket. I'm using my pencil line as my guide to make sure that it's straight. I'm also keeping in mind that I'm not overhanging either the left-hand side of the page or the right-hand side of the page. Give it a good burnish. Some people use packing tape too. I just find that this works for me. I'm sure there's going to be people out there that would be worried about what's going to happen over time. And if you are worried about that, then don't use anything. Like I say, so far I haven't had any problems. And I have some albums. I don't always remember to do it. But since I keep the tape right on my desk now, my working desk, I tend not to forget as much as I once did, because it's right in front of me. Just kind of sitting outside the picture or the frame. Okay, and there's those two pockets, and that is how easy it is to line up pockets. So I am going to round my corners on my 3¼ by 4¼ photo mats. I made 4 of them. So 2 go in the bottom pocket, and 2 are going to go in the top pocket. And there's my second 2. And like I say, just had them just peeking. Okay, so there is the 3 pages of the album with all the flips and flaps that I wanted to add. And the only thing I have left to do is the front and back covers, the inside. And I kept it really plain this time. I just made 2 pockets. And let's get out the pieces we're going to need for all of this. So I'm making 2 pockets, one to go inside the front cover and one to go inside the back cover. They measure 3½ by 6½ less a 1/16. So I just backed them up in the cutter again because I don't want any overhang. Then I scored on both of them at 1/2, turned to the 6½ inch side and scored at 1/2, completely turned it to the other side and scored at 1/2. So let's fold on those score lines. Fold on all the score lines. And again. And again. There we go. We folded on all our score lines. Now we want to do some cutting, some mitering of the corners of these pockets. So again, we cut through the X. miter the top. Remember, it's just the tab. We're not cutting into the pocket. Repeat on the other. And let's get rid of our pieces. And again, burnish your score lines. I do all my burnishing at the same time. And then I'm going to probably start with the front pocket and work my way to the back pocket. So get the book back in. So this is the front of the book. So I'm putting the first pocket down. And what you want to make sure is that when you put this pocket down, when you close your book, the edge of the pocket is not going to be in the fold line. So where the front piece of chipboard matches up to the spine piece of chipboard. So you're going to have it as far to the left-hand side as possible. I'm going to put my adhesive along the bottom of the pocket and get this piece of paper back. And then I'm laying down my pocket as far over to the left as absolutely possible. Making sure that I'm happy. We don't want it hanging over the bottom either, so you might want to stand your book up on its end. Whatever works. Burnish. Just checking one thing here, that it's not hanging. No, it's not. Okay, I'm good. Thought it was hanging over the edge, the left-hand side of the book. So I was just double checking that it was not. I'm putting down my tape. Giving it a good burnish. And then again, I'm just going to check, making sure that when I close my book, yep, we're all good. My last page was catching on a little bit of a lip here, and by the time we get pattern paper on there, we're not going to have that issue anymore. So now put the adhesive on the two side 1/2 inch tabs. And then, when we have, press them down and burnish. Making sure if there's any glue that we get it wiped up. There we go. So there's the pocket on the inside front cover. Now I'm turning to the inside back cover. And here we just repeat it. Only difference is, instead of wanting it as far to the left as possible, we want this one as far to the right as possible. So again, it's not going to be in that fold area of the book, so where the cover meets the spine. So I'm just lining everything up. And I didn't really worry about dry fitting so much on this side, because I kind of went, well, if it fit on the front cover, it should fit on the back cover, because they're both the same size. But you could always dry fit, just as a way to, you know, make sure that everything is the way you want it. Getting some tape, laying my tape across my 1/2 inch tab, going to do some burnishing. go. And then we're going to put our glue on the 2 1/2-inch tabs, one on the left and one on the right. And fold it up. There we go. So there's the pocket that's on the front of this book, and there's the pocket on the back of this book. Now we have some things to put in those pockets. Now, I got 4 photo mats that measure 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. So I'm going to put 2 in the front pocket and 2 in the back pocket. I'm just going to put my pin back in my glue. And I'm going to want to round those corners. Why stop now? Like so. And like so. Only thing is when you punch or round 2 at a time, make sure they stay square. So there's 2 for the front and 2 for the back. And then I have 2 pieces of paper. I'm going to need that, so I don't want to get this out of my way. That measure 7 1/4 by 10 1/2. And on the 10 1/2-inch side, you're scoring at 5 1/4. Okay, so we're going to burnish on those score lines, or fold on those score lines. Burnish those score lines. Do number 2. And then I'm going to want to round my corners. So I'm only rounding the 2 outside edges. You could round these ones too if you wanted to. I'm choosing not to. And the reason I decided to use booklets for this album is because the booklets give you more picture space or photo space or journaling space, but really you only need to put a piece of pattern paper on the front. You can choose to put pattern paper in here, or you can extend it by putting maybe white paper in here and then putting your pictures on top of it. Those choices are yours that you get to make. So here goes one. Once I get it worked its way down, I think we have something stuck. Don't know if this will solve. I think it's right down in that corner. There we go. Let's try this again. So let's put one pocket in. There we go. Now it's in. And then the 2 6 by 6, 6 1/4 by 4 1/4. Something like that. Then let's go to the back. Put our pocket or our booklet in our pocket. Remember, the first couple times you're going to put these booklets in here, it's going to be a little snug. But once they work away, once they're in there a while, they kind of stretch out the paper, because remember, paper is a fiber. There's 1, and there's 2. You could add some 4 1/4 by 3 1/4 photo mats if you wanted to, but I like the 6 1/4. So there we are. And like I say, I still haven't decided if I'm going to put photo mats in the top flaps, but if I was, let's just do a quick measurement here. So the pocket is 5. I probably would only do my photo mats maybe 4 1/4 wide. Let's see if I've got Give me 1 second. So, yeah, you might be able to get away with, oh, that didn't go in it didn't go in there. Let's try this one more time. So it is right there. No, you don't want it any more than that 4 1/4. So I just haven't decided yet if that's what I want to do. So there is our album put together, 3 pages, pocket on the front with booklet and photo mats. Booklet and photo mats on the front with a flap that flips up and a pocket at the bottom. Turn, you got a flap that flips out with a pocket on top with some mats in it. A left and right flap. An angle pocket with photo mats in it. And lots of real estate here. And then 2 more flaps left and right, like the front of page 2. And the back of page 2 is 2 pockets, one at the top, one at the bottom. And then the back inside cover is the same as the front inside cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decorate my folio or my memory keeper, and then I will come back with a walkthrough to share with you how I decorated this album. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, remember to like it, and if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, if you would, I would appreciate that. I'm hoping you're having a great day, and we will see you in the next tutorial. Take care.